One spot is free there.
Right now.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Kushida.
So there's your session.
So we're going to
later on,
continue
maybe you can
minutes.
find it.
If you could please turn your mobile phones off. There's a phone function. If you needed to get the text, we made announcements yesterday. You can download the text. So many different pages on the internet. So Jetsunma is using Stephen Batchelor's translation. Yeah. You can go on our website. There is a link right there on our website. You can download it from there. Yeah. But please turn your phone function off, because also it's interfering with our sound system. Yeah. When it goes, is somebody obviously getting something. Yeah. Also, what else? If you can. There's still people arriving. If you still have some space next to you, please give those people some space. Otherwise, when Jetsunma, like yesterday, after she arrived, we can fill the aisle. Yeah? We had advertised chai break, but we decided not to have chai because there's so many people. Yesterday we had over 450 people. Just getting the chai gonna take half an hour, and then so Jetsunma suggested we have just a little wiggle break. Yeah, she wanted to get some Bollywood music or something. So just everybody getting up and wiggling. Yeah, and then we sit down again, and 12 o'clock comes very quickly. Yeah. At 12 o'clock, the ordained Sangha, please remember, we have a Sangha lunch with Jetsunma up on top of the dining hall. If you see some new people here who haven't been to Kushida for a long time, please take them along. Yeah? Take care of them. And then we meet right after the teachings. Yeah? We pick up our food first from the dining hall and we take it out. Yeah? Thank you so much, everybody.
So people that you can see, there is spaces that are available also there. So there is a spot here, there is a spot there.
Let's go up where
Yeah, here. There is a spot here. Just there next to you. Right there. For sure, no one is using that. For sure, it's available. There is 2 more spots there in the back. The 2. Even 4 people. There's 4 spots there. 4 spots there. In the back house. There is a spot here. There's a spot there also. There's a spot in the back.
Just quietly sit, please. Watch the breath going in, going out. Bring your mind into this room, into your bodies, and then connect your attention with the breath going in and out. So this morning we move on in this text on the basic contemplations needed on the path. Yesterday we were dealing with how to deal with the problem of our desire, especially our sexual desires. And as I said, this was basically directed towards monks, so therefore the emphasis was on how that which we consider to be so desirable, it's not really desirable when you think about it. And if we just remove the outer covering, we discover that there's nothing inside that we especially find attractive. And so, this is, the emphasis on that is to deal with our projection onto the other of all these attractive attributes, which, when we examine it, are not nearly as attractive as we imagine. We all know it, but we don't sit and contemplate it. So for monks, especially those monks who are troubled by, the fantasy that somehow, if they could only find the right girl, life would be wonderful. This is a counteract to that, to recognize that our own body, along with the body of others, is not nearly as desirable as we tend to think. Today he is moving on to the basic subject of the chapter, which is how to cultivate practically the bodhicitta, or the desire for our spiritual enlightenment, not just for the sake of benefiting ourselves so that we ourselves will feel better, but in order to really be able to help to liberate others. In other words, we wake up in order to wake others. And so this chapter is dealing with two things. First, recognizing the equality of ourselves and others, and then the exchanging of ourselves for others. So some of his logical explanations are a little contrived, to say the least, but we must appreciate that he's trying to prove something which is logically unprovable. It can be experienced, but when you put it down to just on the rational level, it's not rational. And to try to make it rational makes it seem very unconvincing. But that's because the actual experience is not in the head, but in the heart. And so this is what we have to appreciate, that at a very profound level, this is obvious. But our intellect up in the brain is by nature dualistic. In other words, self and others. And as long as there is that sense of dualism, me and everyone else out there, not me, it's very difficult to actually experience what he's talking about. But all those who have had genuine realization of the true nature of the mind, which is a non-dualistic level of consciousness, of awareness, of unborn awareness, naturally recognize our interdependence with all beings, not just human beings, but beings in general. Even with trees and nature, this deep level, fundamental level of our interconnection with all beings. That is the nature of reality. But as I say, when we try to show that on a rational level, which is naturally dualistic, it doesn't quite gel, right? But we must remember that at an ultimate level, those who have really realized the nature of the mind, for them it's just obvious. I mean, that is the nature of the mind. Like the sky, you can't divide it. It's interpenetrating everywhere. So that's our true nature. But as I say, when we try to show that on a rational level, then it's not very convincing. So we have to deal with what we've got. Okay, Shantideva. He's going to try to debate you, but it's not a subject which really can be debated. It's something which has to be actually realized within. But those who have really practiced and have reached that non-dual level of unborn primordial awareness, also it's obvious. I mean, you don't even have to think about it. It's beyond thought. That's why you don't think about it. As soon as we bring it into the level of thought, we come across all sorts of contradictions. But in that level which is prior to thought and is pure, undiluted awareness, then we know this is how it is. So he says, this is verse 89, for those who have the text. Having in such ways, he's talking about going off, leaving everything, going and living in the forest, living in caves, being just in ideal, sylvan, conducive atmosphere, just by yourself, sitting and meditating, and so forth. So that was where we left him, up there, meditating. And then he says, in verse 89, having in such ways as these thought about the excellences of solitude, I should completely pacify distorted conceptions, that means all the crazy thoughts in our mind, and meditate on the awakening mind. The awakening mind is bodhicitta. On one level, the whole of the Bodhisattva is based on how to cultivate this aspiration for enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. And the earlier chapters, as any of you who have read the Bodhisattva will know, are dealing with how to cultivate bodhicitta, praise of bodhicitta, and so forth. So in this chapter, he's dealing more with how to, how on a practical level to try cultivating it through the recognizing the equality of ourselves and others, and then through the exchanging ourselves with others mentally. First of all, I should make an effort to meditate upon the equality of self and others. I should protect all beings as I do myself, because we are all equal in wanting pleasure and not wanting pain. So this is the fundamental point. He's then going to go into all kind of convoluted arguments to try to convince us. But the essential point is that all sentient beings, not just human beings, animals, birds, fish, insects, all beings wish for pleasure and happiness and wish to avoid suffering. All beings. You can see, you know, in dogs, when it's warm, they lie in the shade. When it's cold, they lie in the sun. He likes people to be friendly to him, to pat him, to give him nice food, to speak nicely to him. Just as we do. Where's the difference? If we are with people, we like people to be nice to us, to smile to us, to be friendly. He doesn't like it if you shout at him and hit him. He's unhappy. If people shout at us and hit us, we're unhappy. Where's the difference? He likes things to be nice, and then he's happy. If things are difficult, he's unhappy. Where's the difference? And not just with dogs, but with any beings. If we had an ant running across here and I went like that, the ant would rear up and run in the other. Oh, danger! Something's going to hurt me. We are very interconnected. It's very important to recognize that all beings wish for happiness and wish to avoid suffering, just as I do. And so where's the difference? Why should I think only of my happiness and to hell with anybody else? Then that makes us very isolated, very alienated from everyone else, very self-centered, very self-cherishing. And instead of finding happiness, we find discontent, loneliness, a sense of despair, depression. As Shantideva says, well, he's going to say it later here, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama says again and again, you know, for those who really want happiness, we have to think of the happiness of others. If we only think of our own happiness, then we will be sad. We won't get happiness. If we think of the happiness of others, then we are happy. People who are endlessly trying to bring joy to other people suddenly discover they feel better. People who are enclosed in their bubble of self-concern only end up feeling despairing. So, I mean, it's just on a practical level to recognize our interconnection with all beings is very, very important. So at the very start, this is what we have to understand. I mean, I think that all the rest of it follows on from that. To recognize that we are interconnected. And I'm going to quote the source here if I can find him. Right. Okay. Mingyur Rinpoche. Who has heard of Mingyur Rinpoche? Okay. Yes, right. So, Mingyur Rinpoche, as many of you know, he was brought up like as a little Dharma prince. And then when he was 36, he left everything behind and one evening, night, disappeared. And up until that time, he had probably never touched money or even bought a ticket because he, you know, had been always surrounded by his attendants. And suddenly he was all by himself in Gaya, having to buy a third-class ticket to get to Varanasi. Anyway, he wrote a book about the first part. And the book ends where he is in Kushinagara, extremely sick, dying of food poisoning and dehydration in July, out in the open. And so he has a near-body experience, near-death experience. And because he had done many 3-year retreats and was anyway, you know, a very accomplished master, he had a very interesting near-death experience. But this is just a part of it which has to do with what we're talking about here. He says, awareness and emptiness became one, indivisible, just as it always is. The last shred of cohesion slipped away. The entire universe opened up and totally unified with consciousness. No conceptual mind. I was no longer within the universe. The universe was within me. No me separate from the universe. No direction, no within or without, no perception or non-perception, no self or non-self. I was no longer bonded to any sense of a distinct body or mind. No separation existed between me, my mind, my skin, my body, and the rest of the world. No phenomenon existed separate from me. Experiences happened, but no longer to a separate me. Perceptions occurred, but no reference back to anyone. No references at all. Perceptions, but no perceiver. No separate me loved the world. The world was love. So that is a description of the ultimate level of our awareness, of our consciousness, where there is no separation between me and everything else. Our dualistic mind, based on the ego, is what causes us to see a separation between ourselves and the world. There's me and the world. But that is our delusion. That is our fundamental ignorance. We do not see things how they really are because we see them through the perspective of an ego which in itself is false. So this is our problem. And why we meditate, why we practice. To come back to a level of consciousness which ultimately we have never left, but which is obscured. Like the sky, you know, at this time and in the monsoon, you look up, all we see are clouds. And it goes on so long we think the sky is clouds. And then if we keep looking, one day the clouds will part. Oh, there's the blue sky. It's always been there. And then the clouds come back again. But now we know there is sky. That the clouds are impermanent. They are obscuring what is. So this is the fundamental understanding on which this chapter is based. That ultimately there is no self and other. That we are all deeply interconnected. Not just with humans, but with animals, insects, trees, flowers. In this description, which I didn't bring, he looks at the flowers, the trees, and sees he is a tree. Which is unusual for Tibetans to say that. And so it's very important to understand, this is the fundamental understanding which this chapter is based on. So that we understand it's not just intellectual gymnastics here. He's trying to convey intellectually something which can only actually be experienced experientially. Are you with me? Okay. So, because some of his arguments are a bit contorted, but it's because logically we cannot explain something which goes beyond logic and which can only be experienced. But when people go to the, not just Buddhists, anybody, when they go to the very deepest levels of their consciousness, of their awareness, that's what they come to, is our deep, deep interconnection and interdependence. That's how it really is, but we usually cannot realize it because we are working with our egoistic, dualistic mind, which cannot see it. We're distorted before we start. Okay. Forward. Okay, so he's trying to explain now what the basic idea is that I want happiness, I want to avoid suffering, Everybody wants happiness and wants to avoid suffering. Who doesn't? So what makes me special? I'm only one. The rest of them are billions. So even on an intellectual level, it doesn't make sense just to be working so hard for one being when there are billions and billions of beings just like me. Why aren't I taking care of them too? So he's trying to explain why we should care about others beyond ourselves. Although there are many different parts and aspects, such as the hands, as a body that is protected, they are one. Likewise, all the different sentient beings, in their pleasure and their pain, have a wish to be happy that is the same as mine. So just as different parts of our body all want, to be okay, likewise all sentient beings. This is so obvious that all beings want to be happy. And that, the more we can give energy to making others happy, it reflects back, in a selfish way also, to making us happy. So even on a selfish level, it makes sense to spend time bringing happiness to others, because then that reflects back onto ourselves again. And so it's like a cycle, because we're all interconnected. If we go around ignoring people or making people miserable, then their anger and upset reflects back on us, and we get more uptight, more angry, more defensive, and that doesn't work. It's not the way. If we want to be happy, we have to give energy to making happiness for others. Then it's like, a cycle. The suffering that so he's saying, he's arguing back to himself, right? The critic is arguing back at his position. The suffering that I experience does not cause any harm to others, but that suffering is mine because of conceiving of myself as I. Therefore it becomes unbearable, right? So I suffer, others don't suffer, but why do I suffer? Because I think this is my suffering. And so we cling to this idea of I as being very separate from others. Likewise, the misery of others does not befall me. Nevertheless, by conceiving of others as I, their suffering becomes mine. Therefore, it too should be hard to bear. Hence, I should bestow the misery of others, because it is suffering just like mine. And I should benefit others because they are sentient beings, just like myself. So, everybody, if we look at it, when we are suffering, we try to get rid of our suffering so we will feel better. But likewise, all beings are suffering. And so, if we recognize their suffering, we suffer. Therefore, it behoves us to try to remove their suffering too. Then everybody gains. Do you see the logic behind all this? When we look into the world, there is so much suffering. So we have a choice. Either we can close ourselves off from it all and become totally self-absorbed in our own pleasure, or we can open our heart to embrace the suffering of all beings and strive as much as we can within our capabilities to help them to overcome their suffering. One of his concerns here, which comes again and again, is that we will be overwhelmed by the suffering of other beings. That it's just too much because we have enough trouble dealing with our own problems. Why should we extend ourselves to encompass the sufferings of others? But the fact remains that if we are only absorbed in our own suffering, it doesn't resolve the problem, because we just become more and more self-absorbed and our sufferings increase. If we open up our heart to embrace the sufferings of all beings as our own, then conversely, we are able to, the mind transforms. Compassion, even though it might initially bring some pain, at the same time brings wisdom and brings release. I use as an example because many people who are into the social world, they spend all their time trying to help other beings, but they're not helping themselves, so then they kind of burn out. This is why I talk about breathing in and breathing out. But as an example of someone whose mind is totally opening to embrace the suffering of all beings, I would use as an example His Holiness the Dalai Lama, because he not only has the sufferings of his own people, the Tibetans, both in Tibet and outside, to consider, but he also had people coming all the time from all around the world, recognizing that he is, you know, a great bodhisattva. Therefore they come to him and dump all their problems on him too, about all their sufferings in their parts of the world. And because he is a great bodhisattva, he takes in all their sufferings into himself. And, you know, if you tell him something sad, he will weep. I mean, he hasn't learned that big boys don't cry. And, you know, his heart opens and he will sob. But then, 5 minutes later, he's cracking jokes, and everybody's laughing, and everybody comes out smiling, who went in tears, because he takes in their suffering, and then he transforms it into wisdom. This is why wisdom and compassion have to go together, because it's not enough that you take in the suffering of others and it sits inside like a big heavy stone, because then that doesn't help them, it doesn't help us. But if through our understanding and our wisdom and our experience we can transform it, then what started out as suffering becomes a deep sense of strength and empathy and understanding beyond my suffering or your suffering. And so therefore compassion and wisdom are considered to be the two wings of a bird. If you only have one and not the other, if you only have wisdom and no compassion, it becomes dry and intellectual and cold. If you only have compassion but no wisdom, then it becomes too heavy and unbearable. But if you have the two, they feed each other, and then you fly up to enlightenment. So this is why compassion is very, very important. But also wisdom is very important. So the next chapter in this book, the Bodhicharyavatara, is on wisdom. So that the compassion doesn't overwhelm us and we just end up feeling completely distraught and hopeless and helpless and depressed. When you meet the great masters of any tradition, not just Buddhist, any tradition, you meet the great masters. They are so alive, so bright, so their eyes are twinkling, and it's not because they have no compassion, but because they can join that great empathy with great understanding at a very deep level. And so it doesn't sit on them heavy. It lifts them up and makes their mind vast and open and afraid of nothing, fearless. Tara, the great Buddha Tara, she represents fearless compassion. Compassion has to be fearless, like a mother with her child. But to become fearless, genuinely fearless, it has to be conjoined to deep understanding of the way things really are. Then it is a very deep conduit to enlightenment. We have to have a heart which is open and embraces all beings. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But the quickest way to do that is, first of all, to practice recognizing that everyone we meet, every being we meet, wants happiness, doesn't want to suffer. How alike we are. Doesn't matter whether they're nice people, not nice people, difficult, easy. Definitely race, gender, age has nothing to do with anything. All beings, in their heart of hearts, want happiness and don't want to suffer. Well, they might have weird ideas of what happiness is, but they want to feel okay. Everybody wants to wake up in the morning feeling good, okay. Nobody wants to wake up feeling totally stressed and unhappy and hopeless. Who does? So recognizing that in everyone and wishing, may you be well and happy. May you be free from suffering. That heart which reaches out to each being and recognizes their suffering. Because we all want to be happy and almost everyone is suffering. I mean, you sit in a train or a plane or a bus or a traffic jam or a crowded bazaar and you look at all these people and you think every single one wishes happiness, every single one has problems. Just like me. Then we can sit and think, oh, may all beings be well and happy. Imagine in a plane, sitting there and sending out light and love to all the beings sitting there watching their movies of people being blown up and fighting each other, which they consider to be healthy entertainment, relaxing. May they all be well and happy. So that's what this chapter is based on, is the sense of empathy and identity with all other beings, that all other beings, just like us, want to be happy and want to be free from suffering, but they are suffering. And so we try to think how, that our heart embraces their suffering for them. So when both myself and others are similar in that we do not wish to suffer, what's so special about me? Why do I protect myself and not others? But why should I protect them if their suffering does not cause me any harm? Then why protect myself against future suffering if it doesn't cause me any harm now? Why do we take all these precautions for the future when right now that's not me, that's the future somebody? Right now I'm okay, so why are we thinking about the future if, because that doesn't cause me any harm right now, whatever happens in the future. Likewise, the fact that other people's suffering doesn't hurt me doesn't mean I should be indifferent towards that. It is a mistaken conception to think that I should experience the suffering of my next life, for it's another person who dies and another that will be reborn. Of course, this whole text is based on the idea of rebirth, and so it should be remembered that if we met ourselves in our past life, we wouldn't know who's that person. We might not even have been human. We certainly might not have been the gender that we are now, or the race that we are now, the nationality we are now. We met that person, we'd say, who's that? And likewise, in a future life, it's going to be somebody else. It's not me going on. It will be someone quite different. Different gender, different nationality, maybe not even human. We don't know what's going to happen next. So if we care about that in this lifetime, then why should we not care also for all these other people who we don't personally know? Because we're not going to personally know who's coming next in our mind stream. A different person altogether. I mean, sometimes people have the idea that, I am going forward in all my lifetimes, but there's no I. It's just like a kaleidoscope, you have all the pieces and then you juggle them together and they keep making different patterns. And we won't recognize the next pattern. It's another pattern, somebody else. So, likewise, all these other beings, we can't say we're indifferent to other beings Because why are we so attached to the idea then of our next life or our previous lives? I mean, they also were different people, not us, not me. So, surely whenever there is suffering, the sufferer must protect himself from it. Okay? But the suffering of the foot is not that of the hand, so then why does the hand protect it? He's using logic to try to bring us to understand that, you know, if we hurt our foot or our knee, you know, the hand has nothing to do with it. The hand, after all, is perfectly okay. So why does the hand come to the aid of a knee which is not the hand? Because it's connected. So likewise, we're all connected. So just because someone is suffering who doesn't appear to be part of this me, that is part of our delusion, because actually we're all interconnected. So therefore, we should reach out to help beings, even if, as with the hand with the foot, it doesn't seem obvious that we have a connection. Although this may not be justified, it is done because of grasping of the self. But surely, whatever is not justified for myself or others should at all costs be rejected. Such things as a continuum or an aggregation are false. In the same way as a rosary, a mala, or an army, there is no real owner of suffering. Therefore, who has control over it? This is all semantics. But what he's saying is that, you know, we have the idea that everything comes together as a whole. That if you look at it, it's all separate parts, like an army. You know, we say army. But actually an army is composed of all these different people. And then we put a label on it saying army. And likewise with a mala, with a trenwa. You know, each one is a separate bead, but we put them together and give it a single name and think it's an entity. Whereas if we look at it, where the entity is not there, it's all these separate little parts. And so likewise, with thinking about people, they are, we're all interconnected at the same time that we are separate. I will read you from the commentary here, because you might be lost as I am. Oh, look, I'm exactly where I want to be. Okay. Okay, so we'll go back to verse 99, and verse 98 goes on for several pages, so we will leave that one. An opponent might object that it is those who suffer who should protect themselves when they are injured. It is not for others to do so, right? But the pain the foot feels when it is pierced by a thorn is not felt by the hand. So what reason does the hand have for protecting it? It does not make sense. Such protective acts may not be logical, the opponent will continue. He's always arguing against himself, right? Nevertheless, because people are habituated to self-clinging, they are mentally orientated in such a way that, in the present life, they protectively provide for their future existence, and their body's limbs look after each other. To this, Shantideva replies that the inadmissible clinging to I and other should be discarded as much as possible, for it is a delusion. Again, the opponent will say that although previous and subsequent existences do not constitute a single entity, they do form a continuum. Although the hand and the foot are separate, nevertheless they form a single composite. That is why one protects the other. But Shantideva replies that what the opponent calls a single continuum or a composite are illusions. A continuum is nothing more than the coming together of many instants, nothing else. In the same way that a bead of a rosary are identified as a single string or continuum of a mala. As for the composite, this is just like a gathering when many armed men grouped together are called an army. An army is a figment. It is just an imputation or a name and does not exist as such. This is the best way to establish personal no-self. Aside from the self believed to be single, permanent, independent, all assumptions of I and self are associated with a continuum or a gathering. Since the latter are not established, the self is shown to be non-existent. Since continua and gatherings have no existence in themselves, there is no experience of the suffering, no personal self to possess the pain. So who owns it? No one. If there is no subject, no experiencer of the suffering felt, then there is no means of distinguishing between I and other. For if there is no I, no other can be posited in contrast with it. Since neither of them exists, there is no basis for a distinction, and therefore no difference between our pain and another's pain. For this reason, it is illogical to protect ourselves from suffering and not to protect others from it. In view of this, it is demonstrated that since suffering is something to be dispelled, the sufferings of others are to be dispelled along with our own, for the simple reason that pain is pain. What grounds are there for getting rid only of our own suffering and not that of others? It would be a great delusion to think that there were. So, I mean, this is what I'm saying is that, you know, this is a realization which comes when we transcend the dualism of self and other, which brings us back to the ultimate nature of the mind. I mean, this is trying to prove it through the logic, but since logic in itself is based on dualism, it's very difficult to prove non-duality by dualistic means. But he's trying. But I started by giving the ultimate view, as expressed by Mingyur Rinpoche, to remind us that although logically we could argue this back and forward, it is trying to show us something which can actually be realized. At the time of the actual realization of the primordial nature of the mind, all of this is obvious. We don't need logic. It's just an innate feeling of our interconnection with all beings. It just is, that is how things really are. But we do not see it because we see through the distorted lens of our ego. And as long as the ego covers up the true nature of the mind, we have this split of subject and object. But the true nature of the mind completely transcends that dualism of subject and object. Everything becomes the nature of the mind. So that's why he tries to explain it from a rational point of view, it doesn't really quite work because the whole experience is beyond the intellect. It's beyond conceptual mind. It's non-conceptual. As the Buddha called it, it's the unconditioned, the unborn, the deathless. That level of consciousness which we all have, it's usually covered over, so we don't see it. Like, as I said, the clouds covering the sky. But the sky is always there. The clouds could not exist if it were not for the sky. You could not hear me or see me if it was not because we all have primordial awareness. But we don't recognize the awareness. That's the problem. And we think this is me, and not recognizing our deep, deep interconnection with all beings everywhere, which is why we suffer. Because we feel alienated from ourselves and from others. So he's trying to explain it, as I say, from the point of view of logic, but since the actual experience goes quite beyond logic, it doesn't quite gel. But what he's saying is true. It's just that with our rational mind, it's very difficult to comprehend that sense of total open spaciousness. And as Mingyur Rinpoche said, you know, it's not that I become one with the universe is within me. Okay, so being there is no inherent owner of suffering, there can be no distinction at all between I, myself, and others. Thus I shall dispel it because it hurts. Why am I so certain that I should not eliminate the sufferings of others? Pain is pain, and if we realize our interconnection with all beings, then our empathy reaches out, that other people's pain is as meaningful and painful to me as my own pain. So why am I spending all my time trying to relieve my problems and ignoring the suffering of all beings? Because we are actually, at a deep level, interdependent. So other people's suffering is my suffering. But, since neither the suffering nor the sufferer truly exist, why should I turn away the misery of all? Again, from a philosophical point of view, ultimately, since we all partake of the nature of emptiness, you could say we don't exist. Of course, beings do exist. Because our ultimate nature is emptiness, shunyata, doesn't mean we don't exist. Of course we do exist. We are not just shunyata. We also have luminous cognition. We also have awareness. We're not just empty. We also are aware. We also have luminous clarity. But what is non-existent is the idea of our separation from all other beings. Our little ego, like a spider in the middle of the web. That is our delusion. Of course we exist. What we exist goes beyond existence and non-existence, if you want to be philosophical. But we don't exist how we imagine we do. We identify with all the wrong things. That's the big problem. We don't recognize who we really are. That's our tragedy. Because who we really are is something incredible, beyond thought, literally. But we cling to our little sense of personal identity, and thinking if I lose that, then I wouldn't cease to exist. Not recognizing that if we could just drop that, then we would really start to live. This is why the more deeper the wisdom, the greater the compassion. It's not just compassion for poor little starving puppies. It's compassion for the fact that we are all inherently Buddhas, and we don't recognize that, and so we spend all our time clinging to our small sense of I, and through that generating more and more suffering, both for ourselves and for others, and destroying the planet in the meantime. So how sad, when we have such incredible potential, and look what we do with it. Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime wasted, thrown away. So then great compassion arises because of our delusion. Okay, so since neither the sufferer nor suffering truly exists, why should I turn away the misery of all? This is no ground for argument. For if I prevent my own sufferings, surely I should prevent the sufferings of all. So, I mean, just sitting there saying, oh, I'm empty, and then worrying because you're hungry, you know, I mean, doesn't we care about our sufferings, even if we're saying, I'm all empty, really. But empty stomach means something else, right? No, got to get food. So if we care about ourselves, then why are we not caring about others? It's no good just using philosophy to try to pretend that we do have no responsibility towards others and their sufferings. If not, since this compassion will bring me much misery, why should I exert myself to develop it? Should I contemplate the suffering of living creatures, how could the misery of compassion be more? If one person's suffering, the suffering of many would be destroyed, surely kind-hearted people would accept it for the sake of themselves and others. So he gives this story. He says, thus the Bodhisattva Sapusha Chandra, although aware of the harm the king would cause him, accepted his own suffering in order to eradicate the misery of others. So it's one of these stories in the Mahayana Sutras. There was a Bodhisattva whose name was Sapusha Chandra, and the king did not like Dharma and was very against him. But the court, all the people in the palace wanted to hear the Dharma. And the king said to this Bodhisattva, if you preach the Dharma, I will kill you. And he thought about that, and he thought, well, it's more important that I have all these people to hear the Dharma. It doesn't matter if he kills me. So then he preached the Dharma, and the king got him and chopped his head off, or chopped him into little pieces, I think. And then afterwards he felt sorry. End of story. Thus, because he loves to pacify the pain of others, he whose mind is attuned in this way would enter even the deepest hell, just as a wild goose plunges into a lotus pool. So if one really cares about the sufferings of others, one would go even into the deepest suffering out of love and empathy for them, as people do. I mean, there are many people who sacrifice their lives to really be of benefit to others. They go to live in slums, they go to work in very dire situations, putting their own lives at risk because of their great love. But usually when you meet such people who spend all their time surrounded by the real misery of the world, they have such light. They are so happy. And every day they're hearing these horror stories. I mean, I know people who are like that. They're hearing these ghastly stories. Not the other than another enough to really go, oh. But it's like they're living on nectar, because their compassion is so great that they just feel such inner love and joy towards anything they can do to relieve the suffering of others. That's their joy. Their joy is in being there of service to others. And so instead of becoming depressed and burned out and upset and just, oh God, it's too much, they're not like that. Even if sometimes they hear this thing and they cry a bit, and then, okay, we'll deal with it. And so when you meet them, they're just full of light, full of love, endless, endless, like the sun, just shining, shining, shining. So it's true that when we are totally self-absorbed in our own pleasures and avoiding pain, or by all means, and just trying me, they are the ones who end up alcoholics and totally in despair, because they're just, it's so meaningless to spend all our life just trying to protect ourselves and ignoring others, or using others for our own benefit. Then we end up feeling very, very deprived and depressed. But if we open up our hearts to embrace everyone and anyone who comes with problems, if we can help them and alleviate them or share them or just listen to them, then far from being overwhelmed by suffering, it becomes almost the source of happiness. It's a very interesting phenomenon, but it's true. Those who really are there for the sake of all others are the happiest people on earth, because nothing can ever shake them. They've heard it all. They've seen it all. Their happiness and pleasure is not fragile. And their heart is open completely. And when our heart is open, what's inside our heart is love. And so therefore, ironically, the more we open ourselves to the suffering of others, the deeper will be our own sense of inner well-being, which we share with others. So when we meet the great beings of this world, you look at them, they're happy beings, despite the fact that they know perfectly well the suffering of the world, and take that with them. So, I mean, although he's talking about, taking on the suffering of the world, it is actually the only way to go forward on the spiritual path. We cannot enclose ourselves in a bubble. And as I say, when you look at people who are open to all the suffering, you see that they have a joy in that. And so people gravitate to them because as I say, it's like coming out of the cold of ordinary human indifference to others' suffering and then protecting themselves by the walls of their own self-concern, out into the sun. Out into the sun of genuine love and compassion and empathy. I mean, there are people like that all over who really care. Care for others, care for the environment. And they are happy people, despite all the suffering that they're dealing with daily. So what he's saying, even though it's not very, I don't find his arguments very convincing, you might. But what he's pointing to is true. What he's pointing to is true. That the more we open ourselves, instead of protecting ourselves, I already have enough suffering, I can't deal with the suffering of others, then we're going to keep suffering. But if we open our heart to the sufferings of others, somehow it alleviates our own suffering. This is why also in psychiatry now, more and more people who have a lot of, not psychotic, but people who have depression and other psychological problems and trauma are encouraged to go out and work with people who have even more problems than they do, so that they can begin to drop their self-absorption and open their heart to others, and that is the best way to cure them. That they realize that whatever we're suffering is nothing compared with what others are suffering. And as compassion begins to arise, it is healing. It's healing not only for the others, but also for ourselves. It's a beautiful compassione, to feel with others, to recognize that other suffering is our suffering, and it doesn't make a double suffering. That's the point. It somehow is a very healing emotion. The heart open instead of being closed up in its own self-preoccupation, which causes a lot of pain. Do you understand what I'm saying? We're afraid. We think, I already have enough problems, I can't deal with other people's problems. And the only way to keep myself safe is to close myself up. But that actually creates more problems. And if we can open ourselves, then we will discover that it's actually a whole different territory of the heart, and actually brings peace. And a sense of interconnection. We're all the same. We're all the same. Animals also. We're all the same. We all have the same. How people can think that animals are just like, plastic dogs is unbelievable. Because anybody who's had a pet knows that there's a being there looking at you. all have their own. I mean, even when I was in Lahore, I would catch mice in one of these humane traps to take them away. And, you know, each one responded differently. Some would be very angry, grasping it. Some would be sticking their nose up and looking at me, oh, what are you doing? Why am I stuck here? Others would be cowering, others would... I mean, each one had its own response to the same situation. Each one was its own little self. And so if that's so with mice, what sticks with all the rest of us? You know, all animals are beings. So, you know, there's nowhere, however far you go, that we can get beyond the basic intelligence of this universe. Each cell is intelligent. And we're all interconnected at a very deep level. And our pain is because we've cut ourselves off. So the release is to, again, experience our total interconnection with all beings and the whole universe, not just, you know, animal beings, but plants, trees, rocks, sea, everything, all interconnected at a very profound level. So we would be happy to do even the worst things if it could benefit other beings, even to going into the hell realms happily. Happily. Like the Bodhisattva Siddhigarbha. Siddhigarbha is especially known for going down into the hell realms and comforting all the beings in the hell realms. He's especially popular in the Mahayana circles in China and Vietnam. He's very lovely Bodhisattva. He has a staff and it jingles, and when they hear the jingle, then they feel release. Sign him. Will not the ocean of joy that shall exist when all beings are free be sufficient for me? What am I wishing for my liberation alone? So the whole point is that we all go together when we go. And that our whole reasoning for wishing to gain liberation from samsara is in order to open up the doors of the prison, so that all beings can escape from the prison house of samsara, not just me. If we considered like we were in prison and then all our family, our mothers and our children and our relations and all our friends are still in prison, and somebody gave us a key and said, here you are, you can get out of prison now, would we just go and leave all our family behind? No. The reason for opening the door is so that we can say to them, oh, come out, quick, quick, quick. But then since in beginningless time we've all been interrelated with all beings, then all beings are our mother and father and children, so therefore all beings have to be liberated, because there is ultimately no separation between us all. We are all very interconnected and have always been interconnected. It's only our delusion which sees us as separate. It's like bubbles in the water. You know, we might think that each bubble is separate, but actually they are all water. Therefore, although working for the benefit of others, I should not be conceited or consider myself wonderful, and because of the joy there is in solely doing this, I should not hope for any ripening effect. In other words, you know, when we are doing things for others and trying to benefit other beings, we shouldn't feel pleased with ourselves about that, because it's a natural thing that we should wish to do. It's not something which, you know, we should think that's something special for me. I mean, or nor should we do it in order to gain good merit for the future. We should just do it because it's a natural thing to do. Just as a mother with a child, she takes care of the child is sick, she's so worried about the child, she would gladly take on the sickness of the child onto herself if the child could be free from it. She's not thinking, oh, this proves I'm such a special person. Or she's not thinking, oh, if I care about my baby, then I'll get good merit points. She cares about the child because she cares for the child more than herself. And that's natural. So that's what we have to aspire to, that sense of joy just in serving others, not because of anything that's going to be a special good benefits for us, but just because we have a great joy. I mean, people who are genuinely altruistic, their joy is in serving others, not because they're going to get an award or because, as I said, they're going to make good karma. It doesn't even occur to them. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it in order to bring happiness and relieve the suffering of others as much as they can, because that's what they want to do. That's what gives joy. Yeah? I mean, this is, of course, obvious, really, but... therefore, just as I protect myself from unpleasant things, however small, in the same way I should act towards others with a compassionate and caring mind. Although the basis is quite impersonal, through constant familiarity I come to regard the drops of sperm and blood of others as I. So in the same way, why should I be unable to regard the bodies of others as I? So what he's saying is that how we came about to get this body is because of the union of our parents. In other words, the sperm from the father and the ovum of the mother, neither of which are me, came together and created a body, which in time gave birth, and here we are, and we regard that, which came together from two completely different people, as me. And so we give it a label saying, I, this is my body. But it actually came together from two totally disparate sources, father, mother, which neither of whom are me. You understand what he's saying? So when those two came together and created something which became a body, which then we gave the label me, since this being which came together from completely non-me sources is now called me, why can I not therefore think of others likewise who came from disparate sources as being an extension of myself? Try that one. So in the same way, why should I be unable to regard the bodies of others as I, since it is not difficult to see that my body is also that of others, right? The parents. Having seen the mistakes in cherishing myself and the ocean of good in cherishing others, I shall completely reject all selfishness and accustom myself to accepting others. In the same way as the hands and so forth are regarded as limbs of the body, likewise, why are not embodied creatures not regarded as limbs of life? Through acquaintance has the thought of I arisen towards this impersonal body. In a similar way, why should it not arise towards other living beings? Because if you look at the body, we say my body, but most of the body is carrying on happily by itself without asking the ego anything. I mean, the heart is beating, the lungs are going in and out, the stomach is digesting, the liver and kidney are doing what liver and kidneys do. Nobody's asking me. I mean, most of our body is functioning perfectly well impersonally, luckily, from our interference, right? We cannot tell the mind cannot tell the kidneys what to do, the liver what to do, the heart what to do. It's doing it. It actually has nothing to do with my sense of I. Do you understand? I mean, all our body is filled with billions and billions and billions of cells who are happily going on doing their little cell thing. They're not asking me. It's a totally impersonal process. The I has nothing to do with it. It's not referring back to headquarters. It's going on by itself happily. So who can say this is my body? Since 99.9% of it is not under my control. Have you thought of that? We can move our limbs, but we cannot actually, we are not in charge of almost all our bodily functions. They are independent of us, working on their own system. So who is to say this is my body? I mean, the body gets sick, we don't choose that. The body gets old, we don't choose that. It just happens. The body has its own cycle, the body has its own agenda. It's nothing to do with me. So we think we own our body, but actually we don't own anything. The body is very independent, doing its own thing. So therefore, he's saying, so through acquaintance, because of we get habituated, then what I arises towards this impersonal body. It's actually not it's a body, it's like they said at the beginning, it's like a guest house which we're inhabiting, but it's not our guest house. We didn't furnish it. And all the plumbing works independently of us. We're not in charge of the plumbing, or the light, or anything in the room. It's there, and we use it. But it's not mine. And in time we leave. Right? All we're in charge of is the external bit, which, as we said, is the silken bag. But the actual contents we're not really in charge of. They're carrying on doing their own thing in their own way. So therefore, here's saying, in the same way I should habituate myself to having a compassionate and caring mind for others. Because, we take care of ourselves. In a similar way, it would not arise toward other living beings. Our body doesn't really belong to ourselves likewise. So therefore, since we think our body does belong to ourselves, why can we not extend that towards all other beings? When I work in this way for the sake of others, I should not let conceit or the feeling I'm wonderful arise, and so forth. It is like just feeding myself. I hope for nothing in return. Therefore, just as I protect myself from unpleasant things, however slight, in the same way I should habituate myself to have a compassionate and caring mind for others. It is out of his great compassion that the Lord Avalokiteshvara has even blessed his name to dispel the nervousness of being among other people. Apparently in one of the sutras, Avalokiteshvara Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion, said that if people recite, sometimes people, when they're with many other people or when they have to give talks, they become very nervous. Apparently one of the great fears, sometimes more than the fear of death, is the fear of addressing many other people. I don't know, it's strange. But that's what they say. That people get very nervous about addressing many, many people. So, therefore, in one sutra, apparently, Avalokiteshvara, he said that just reciting his name, or Mani Padme Hum, which is his mantra, will dispel the fear of being with many, many people. So, I should not turn away from what is difficult, for by the power of familiarity, I may be made unhappy, even when someone whose name once frightened me is not around. What? Sorry. Commentary. Okay, commentary. We should rid ourselves of all apprehension, thinking that, although its benefits are great, the exchange is just too difficult for us. We should not allow ourselves to be deterred by hardships. We should not turn away from something just because it is difficult. It will become easy by dint of training. With the passage of time, and thanks to gradual habituation, the thought that we might gladly take upon ourselves the sufferings of others, exchanging our position from theirs, is an idea that at the outset we were afraid even to hear about, but now will sound so second nature to us that we will be miserable without it. We will feel deprived at the prospect of being unable to work for the good of others. It is as when some people who are at first seem so terrible to us that we are frightened even at the sound of their name. But when we get to know them and get used to them, we may end up actually liking them and would miss them if they were not there. So, in other words, that the thought that we may take on the sufferings of others in the beginning might really frighten us and feel, oh, we couldn't possibly do that, I couldn't manage. But if we meditate on that again, because this is meditation, right? If we meditate on the idea again and again and again and reach out to try to help other beings who are suffering and try to help, then gradually we begin to understand that it's not terrifying, that it's actually a very beautiful thing to do, until we become so used to that if we couldn't be there for helping other beings, we would feel deprived, we would feel sad. And so therefore the thing which in the beginning looks like the most awful thing, how can I take on the sufferings of others, eventually becomes something which we embrace and which we feel so happy. The more we can do it, the happier we are to be able to be there for the sake of all beings, and to help them as much as we can. Nobody is going to relieve all the sufferings of this world. But, even Avalokiteshvara cannot do that. But we can, as these circumstances arise, we can be open to helping in whatever direction we are called to help in. I mean, there are 10,000 million things to do to benefit other beings, and we should find something which speaks to us that we can help in and do what we can. And then we discover that what looks like really impossible isn't impossible. In fact, it's quite doable. And that by doing it, we grow inwardly and we stop being so childish, which is what we were discussing yesterday. We're all such little children inside. We need to grow up. And one way of doing that is by opening our heart towards empathy and compassion and the desire to be of benefit to other beings, and not just enclose ourselves in our preoccupation with our own well-being and avoidance of anything which we find difficult. In the same way as the hands and so forth are regarded as limbs of the body, and likewise, why are embodied creatures not regarded as limbs of life? Oh no, I did that already. We're on 20, aren't we? What? Yeah. Thus, whoever wishes to quickly afford protection to both himself and other beings should practice that secret, holy secret, the exchange of self for others. Okay, we will leave it just here, and please stand up and shake yourselves about it. One time I was at this interspirituality conference in Costa Rica, and during the talks there was this young Indian couple. They were both sort of around 20, and when they really had to stand up, they got everyone, including these Christian bishops and Sufi imams and rabbis and everybody, doing Bollywood dancing. And so, I mean, this 90-year-old Mexican shaman lady and everybody, they were all, you know, they put music on and everybody was doing Bollywood. And for about 5 minutes, it was quite something to see. And then he said, this young man, he said, okay, now everybody sit down, breathing in, breathing out. And he got all that diffuse energy. It was very skillful. However, we don't have any Bollywood, so you just move yourself up and down, stretch your knees and your shoulders, and just jig around a bit. And then when you feel better, sit down. Okay, now please come quietly, settle down again. 20. Thus, whoever wishes to quickly afford protection to both himself and other beings should practice the holy secret, the exchanging of self for others. So, as many of you know, one of the methods which especially became very popular in Tibet later on, this of course he wrote in India in the 8th century, but in Tibet in the 11th century came a great Indian scholar and practitioner called Dipankara Atisha, and through him arose a lineage called the Kadampa, and a practice which is called Lojong. Lojong means mind training, but it's really a training for our heart, our whole attitude, especially the understanding that, you know, all beings are as important and more important than ourselves, and that all the difficulties which arise in our life, rather than being an obstacle to our practice, through skillful attitudes change towards difficulties, can become the great opportunities of our life. I mean, again and again I meet with people who tell me how, you know, at times in their lives they had terrible accidents or great sicknesses or deep loss, which at the time seemed so devastating, but later, looking back, they saw created a great life change. And so that now they are very grateful for that time, even though at the time it seemed like, you know, a great disaster and tragedy for them. Later on, looking back, they saw that this was been a big shift in their life, and they were grateful now for that time. So these Lojong teachings, which came from Atisha and his followers, very much emphasize how those things which normally we would regard as being an obstacle, if are used skillfully, can become our great spiritual opportunities. And among the many techniques which were devised for helping us to understand this was a practice called Tonglen. And Tong means to send out, Len means to receive in. So it's giving and taking. And the essential teaching is that that we accept the sufferings of others and we give out our own innate well-being. So with the in-breath, we take in, if we consider somebody who is suffering, we're sitting with someone who's sick, or we know someone who's going through a lot of trouble, and we think about them, or we have their photo, and we, with the in-breath, take in the form of dark light or dark smoke, with the in-breath into ourselves, reaching down into the heart, and then with the out-breath we send out light and love, and imagine that soaking into that person and completely clearing all their suffering. So, I mean, there are various ways of doing this practice, and we can also use it on ourselves. But the idea is that we do the opposite of what common sense would tell us to do. I mean, you know, our idea is that we would dispel the dark and bring in the light, and here we're bringing in the dark, but transforming it immediately into light, out of compassion. So the bringing in the darkness is the compassion, and then the sending out of light is the loving kindness, the metta or maitri. So this was considered at the beginning so radical that who would want to bring in the sufferings of others, that it was regarded as being a very secret teaching. And for a long time it was not given out as a general teaching for people, but I think to surprise of everybody it was discovered to be very popular. People had assumed nobody would want to do that. But in fact they discovered a lot of people have more compassion than they imagined. And actually they found it very helpful, especially when we are faced by people who are in deep, very sick or in deep grief, we feel so helpless. But then if we practice Tonglen, it can be very beneficial. And even, people have said again and again that, in hospital rooms where they're sitting doing Tonglen with someone who's very sick, nurses and doctors will come in and comment on how the whole atmosphere seems to have changed and what are they doing. It's not that they're going to cure the person, but it nonetheless changes the whole attitude, and the person concerned who doesn't know you're practicing Tonglen nonetheless feels something there, a kind of inner sense of peace and well-being, even though they are so sick. So it's a very powerful practice, and it's the main point, apart from benefiting in some way the person who is suffering, it also hits at our own self-cherishing mind, because our self-cherishing mind says, I am so sorry that you're sick, but I'm glad it's not me. And so to consciously desire to take in the pain of others into ourselves and replace it with our well-being completely turns around the ego's desire to only, affect good things for itself and to avoid as much as possible the suffering. So this is a very powerful way of really confronting our ego, and at the same time teaching us that by opening up the heart, actually it can lead to much deeper levels of compassion and empathy, which give rise to joy, which we don't normally think about. Actually, there is benefit for others, also personal benefits, in that someone whose heart is really open is, as I said before, they have joy inside, an unshakable joy, not based on pleasure, but based on being in contact with a very deep source of our inner being. Our inner being is love, but normally it's blocked off by our ego concern. So this is trying to dig down below that hard crust of me and mine to a very, very deeper source of wisdom and loving compassion, which is our true nature. We are totally good in our true being. The other is just dark clouds. It's not our true nature. In any form of Buddhism, our greed, our anger, our ignorance are described as adventitious. Adventitious means they are not inherent, that they are just something which comes, is there, but it is not part of the true being. Like if we have a silver pot, then if we leave it, it gets tarnished. And in the end it can go really quite black. And we look at that pot and we think, oh, that pot is so ugly, it's all black. But that tarnish is not inherent in the pot. Therefore, we can rub it, polish it, and the tarnish will go. It has never harmed the silver. However thick the tarnish, that never ever pollutes the silver. The silver is always there, but it's covered over by the tarnish. But because the tarnish is not inherent in the silver, therefore it can be cleaned. So all our negative emotions, our klesha, are not inherent to our true nature. Our true nature is completely pure. Therefore they can be removed, all these tarnish. It's just tarnish. And it obscures the true nature of the mind. But the true nature of the mind is just waiting to be discovered. It never changes. However evil we might be, doesn't in any way pollute the nature of the mind. However good, we may be, it never beautifies more the nature of the mind. Nature of the mind is nature of the mind. Like however thick black the clouds may be, and the pollution never tarnishes the pure sky. However beautiful the rainbows, never really affects the sky. Sky is just sky. So we shouldn't get depressed by how stupid we may feel we are and how great our faults. They can be changed. However many mistakes we've made, doesn't matter. Doesn't affect our true being, our true nature. So therefore Tonglen is this understanding that our true nature is completely pure, and however much darkness we breathe in, it can never ever affect the true nature of the mind, so we don't have to fear. We can take in all the darkness of others' suffering and sickness. It will never ever affect the nature of the mind, which then is revealed because it hits, this darkness hits at our ego clinging. When the ego disappears, then the natural effulgence of our true nature can come forward. So all the light and love of our true nature, it just comes out, and it never ever can be polluted by the darkness. Like if there's darkness for 1,000 years, but you switch on the light, where's the darkness gone? So like that, this practice of Tonglen became very popular, and even today now also it is taught in many, even in Zen centers. Catholics love it. It's very helpful. It doesn't depend on you know, any particular religious or spiritual point of view. It's a very beautiful practice for bringing up our empathy and our feeling of, you know, the inseparability of us all at a more profound level. So, because of attachment to my body, even a small object of fear frightens me. Spiders. Who would not revile as an enemy this body that gives rise to fear? So we are very attached to our body, so then even small things like mosquitoes or insects or snakes or anything cause us to get all upset and worried and fearful because of our body, right? So who would not revile as an enemy? You stupid body, right? A body that gives rise to fear. Well, by wishing for a means to remedy the hunger, thirst and sickness of the body, I might kill birds, fish, deer, and loiter by the sides of roads to rob others. So all of these things which we do, we create so much bad karma for the sake of our own body. You know, our body actually causes us a lot of problems. We're always trying to keep it fed, keep it clean, keep it healthy. And people do all sorts of terrible things in order just to make a livelihood so that they can feed their body. I mean, many people are hunters, fisher people, and they're not even thinking about the suffering they're causing to the beings they kill. And along with that, you know, the really bad karma that they are making from depriving others of their life. I mean, at least if people are hunting and killing in order to feed themselves, it's one thing. It's another thing also when they hunt and kill just for the pleasure of hunting and killing, not because they actually need to eat the flesh of the beings they've killed. I mean, terrible karma. How we can think that that's sport? Anyway, I won't go on about that. You know, so people make enormous bad karma, even in the kind of careers that they choose for themselves, which cause harm to other beings, just in order to keep their body, as they hope, in good condition. By wishing for a means to remedy the hunger and thirst and sickness, I kill birds, fish, deer, I become a robber, bandit. If for the sake of its profit and comfort I would kill even my mother or father and steal the property of the triple gem, then I would undoubtedly proceed in to burn in the flames of the deepest hell. So we do all sorts of ghastly things. We murder people, we steal, we do all sorts of unfathomable things, mostly for the sake of the body. So therefore, in that case, you could see the body as not being our friend. Therefore, what wise man would desire, protect, and venerate this body? Who would not scorn it and regard it as an enemy? That's what he's saying. So, I mean, the idea is that we're so very, very fond of our bodies, and we're saying, well, I need to protect my body because my body is very precious to me. So he's trying to say, well, actually, you know, because of our bodies, we do all sorts of things which we shouldn't do and make so much bad karma. And so why should we be grateful to the body? You know, it's no good saying, well, it's on my body and therefore it's very precious, because actually, on account of the body, we do so many bad things that, you know, maybe we should regard the body as not being our friend, because we do, you know, all the things that people do, most of it has to do with, you know, keeping their bodies well fed and taken care of or protected. If I give this, what shall I have left to enjoy? Such selfish thinking is the way of ghosts. In other words, if we are very selfish and we think, well, if I give that, then I won't have anything, you know, and so we don't like to give, then we will end up as ghosts, as hungry ghosts, preta. If I enjoy this, then what shall I have left to give to others? Such selfless thinking is the quality of the gods. So, I think that's obvious, yes. If we are very miserly and cling to everything, think, if I give this, I won't have anything left for me, then that kind of miserly thinking is considered to be leading into a rebirth as a ghost. And if we are thinking, but if I eat this, then I won't have anything to give to everybody else. And then we are so generous that we give things even that we especially like in order to make others happy, then that's regarded as being very meritorious and likely to be rebirth in celestial realms. In Buddhism, all the realms of existence are impermanent. So for the deepest hells to the highest heavens, it is only that level of existence until the karma which caused that has been exhausted, and then we get recycled again. We're endlessly being recycled. It's very ecologically sound. But it's tiresome because we're caught in this wheel and we're going round and round and round, sometimes up, sometimes down, this way, that way. But, you know, we have to break the wheel. One of our young nuns, who doesn't really know much English actually, and she said to her English teacher the other day, you know, samsara is a bad plan. And that's it. Samsara is a bad plan. Let's get out. But when getting out, we take everyone with us. We can't get out until all beings are out. So we find the door to open the prison and we make sure everybody goes out. Okay, so then, if for my own sake I cause harm to others, I shall be tormented in hellish realms. Those hellish realms are not just, you know, they're not places. They're psychological states, even when we die. I mean, in the text, and Shantideva himself says, in another chapter, who made the hellish realms? Who made the demons tormenting the people in the hellish realms? Who made the red-hot pavements? It is all created by the distorted mind. Shantideva himself says it in here, not in this chapter, but in another chapter. It's all about a distorted mind. In other words, when we die, we project. We project now, right now. But because there is a certain physical base, it's not total projection. But once we are disembodied, then it's total projection. And so therefore what we project comes back at us. It's like a hologram. And we take it for being reality. And so then if we have a very evil mind, and a mind which delights in harming others, then when we die, that comes back at us, and then we get more angry and fighting and aggressive. So it becomes like a wheel. We are, again, angry and vicious towards something which we ourselves are projecting at ourselves. So this is why the hell realms seem endless, because we keep making that spiral. It just keeps going round and round and round. And we can't get out of it. It's the reason why in this lifetime now, why we have a certain amount of free will, we should be very careful what we're doing with our mind. So that we will, and the texts also say that when we die, we meet with the kind of people on the same kind of psychic wavelength as ourselves. So therefore we should be careful how we treat our mind now, because that's what we're going to meet when we die. And we won't recognize it as our own projections. We'll think that's reality, and then we will react back again in the same way, and then, we can be in serious trouble for a long time. I mean, this I think is really very true. That now is the time we have the opportunity to transform our mind. Once we're dead, it's too late. And we need now to make sure that our minds are in a state, what we're thinking about, how we're responding to circumstances and other people, are such that when the time comes to leave this body, we will be comfortable with what appears next. But also we should recognize that whatever does appear, whether very divine or very hellish, is all just a projection of our own mind. Not believe it to be true. Okay. So if for my own sake I cause harm to others, I should be tormented in hellish realms. But if for the sake of others I cause harm to myself, I should acquire all that is magnificent. By holding myself in high esteem, I shall find myself in unpleasant realms, ugly and stupid. But should this attitude be shifted to others, I shall acquire honors in a joyful realm. So this is just to encourage himself along. If we think of ourselves as something very special and become very proud, and I mean, he's talking to monks, and a lot of the monks there, everybody gives great honor to them because they're monks, independent of their actual character. And so, therefore, if they think, oh, I'm something special, look, everybody honors me, look, oh, I'm really something nice, then next lifetime they're going to have to pay for that stupid pride. Whereas if they see themselves as being just, giving the honor to others and thinking themselves the lowest and giving others the honor, then next lifetime they will receive the results of that much more meritorious frame of mind. We take with us what is in our mind. So if we are very proud, then we will be low. If we don't see ourselves as so important, other people as much more important and interesting, then we will be creating very good states of mind. It's not that we think we're stupid, oh, I'm hopeless, I'm useless, I'm no good, everybody else is wonderful, me, I've never been any good, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, I'm stupid, nobody ever loves me. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean low self-esteem in that sense of hating ourselves, putting ourselves down, and ending up, because that is also me. Right? In Buddhism, pride means thinking we're superior to others, but also thinking we're inferior to others. Because if we think, oh, I'm the most stupid person on earth, that's very proud. You know, who says you're the most stupid person on earth? And it's also self-regarding. Whether we see ourselves as stupid or as brilliant, it's still me. And people who are psychologically damaged, their ego is very hurt, are thinking about themselves continually. So it's not about thinking that we're high or low. It's finding other people of more interest and their well-being as being of primary concern, so that we can forget ourselves, because ourselves are healthy. Do you understand? I mean, this is, I think, sometimes it's misunderstood. People, you know, there's a lot in the text talking about self-cherishing, and so therefore people think if they're ever nice about themselves that they're being egoistic and self-cherishing. But in fact, the Buddha said that, you know, the first thing we do is to learn shamatha meditation, calm abiding meditation, where the mind becomes quiet, calm, non-distracted, which gives rise to joy. And at the same time, we do meditations on loving kindness and compassion and rejoicing, directed first at ourselves. Now, we are not sending love and compassion to the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind is love and compassion. It doesn't need any more help. Who are we sending love and compassion to when we think, may I be well and happy? The ego. Because the ego needs to be healthy and well balanced in order to walk the path towards egolessness. Who is walking the path? The ego. Saying, I have no ego, I'm just empty. Who is saying, I have no ego, I'm just empty? I'm saying. That isn't egolessness. That's just the ego saying, I'm no ego. I think this is important to understand, because sometimes people end up feeling very anti themselves, but that's not spiritual. Sometimes I say it's like if we break our leg. The leg now is in a cast, it can't walk, it's painful. Someone bangs against our leg, ouch! We're always thinking, leg, leg, leg. It can't walk. It's an unhappy leg. And so we're always thinking about our leg. But when the leg is healed, then we can run, skip and jump. But we're not thinking leg. Right? We're not, how many people, I mean, if your knees are aching, you're thinking about your knees. When your knees are not aching, you're not thinking about your knees. Right? You understand? So likewise with the ego. If the ego is hurting, then we're thinking about, poor me. Oh, I'm such a bad person. Oh, I'm so stupid. Oh, I'm this, I'm that. But it's all me, me, me. But if we are friends with ourselves, and our sense of self is psychologically healthy and well balanced through the practice of shamatha and vipassana, and through the practice of loving kindness and compassion, we are friends with ourselves. The word actually, which we translate as loving kindness, actually means to be a friend. Metta. And the word metta, meaning a friend. So we make friends with ourselves. Then we don't think about ourselves. Like the leg that's healthy. We're not thinking about the leg, but we can use the leg. So if our sense of self is healthy, we're friends with ourselves, then that self will walk the path towards selflessness. Do you understand? It's very important. Just bashing ourselves up inwardly flagellating ourselves. It's not the point. That just makes a very injured sense of me. It's still me. To dissolve the self, we have to be totally healthy inwardly. Then others are more important, more interesting. We're not afraid to reach out, to embrace others, because we're not protecting ourselves anymore. But it is important to remember, because otherwise sometimes people get very anti-me, and every time anything happens which they might enjoy, they feel guilty, because that's self-cherishing. And then they end up depressed. It's not that. We have to be healthy inside. I mean, Buddha didn't put it that way, but he obviously meant that because of all these meditations to make us feel better and to accept ourselves. And that's not the arahat. Just as ordinary beings like us on the path walking, we have to have... And Shantideva himself says that while pride and arrogance are a klesha, are negative, thinking I'm special, self-confidence is essential on the path. We have to believe that we can do it, otherwise we'll never do anything. If we're telling ourselves before we start that we can't do it, then we won't. But if we think, well, others can, why not me? I can do it. Even though that's ego, so what? Then we can accomplish, and as we accomplish, the ego naturally begins to dissolve through wisdom, through true seeing. We begin to access deeper levels of our consciousness. And there's a shift in consciousness to a level which is beyond the ego. But we can't do that while we have an injured sense of self. Only when our sense of self is healthy and strong, then we can drop the self. Anyway. If I employ others for my own purposes, I myself shall experience servitude, but I myself use myself for the sake of others, I should experience only lordliness. So, again, he was probably actually, despite the traditional version, he probably was quite an important scholar in his own monastery. And in these monasteries, they would, people, who, especially if they either had wealth or they had status, would have either other monks or even lay people come in and being their working for them, being their servants, doing their washing and cleaning and taking care of them in every way. As you see with lamas nowadays, they have their retinue who take care of them. So he's saying that if I do that, and especially if they're not nice to their servants and think themselves as superior to the people who are attending them, then they will have, later on, they will find in next life that they are in a subservient role. Whereas if, in the meantime, they are using themselves to serve others, then they themselves will make lots of good karma to be reborn in good states of being. I mean, even in the Tibetan system, when you get very high lamas, you often find that their attendants are also high lamas. So the attendants, who themselves could have attendants, are themselves working as the attendants to the lama who they consider to be their teacher. And therefore, in that way, they are putting themselves in the role of a servant, rather than themselves being the Lord, being served by others. So I think that this is also a very good thing for them. Later on, when they have matured and studied with this other Lama that they are serving, then they themselves will go on. But in the meantime, especially while they are younger, then they are very happy to serve someone that they regard as being their master. And so often you meet with high lamas who have actually all these tukus underneath them who are acting as their attendants. Whatever joy there is in this is a very famous verse. Whatever joy there is in this world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. Whatever suffering there is in this world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. So, in other words, of course, I mean, that is, a big saying, but in general, when you meet people who are genuinely happy all the time under any circumstances, not just when things go right, and they, but under all circumstances, they are usually people who are there serving others, caring for others, looking after others. Their joy is in taking care of others, whether things go right or things go wrong. They have that inner joy of knowing their interest, their desire is for the happiness of others. The people who are most upset and depressed and interned are those who are only thinking about themselves, therefore only living for their own pleasure and to avoid as much as possible their own suffering. And often they end up very depressed, often as alcoholics or whatever, because they are so inverted. And at a certain point they recognize that their life is pretty meaningless. What's it all for anyway? Okay, I've got everything, now what? Many people come to me who say that previously they were very successful businessmen or very successful IT people or in various, whatever their profession, they were very successful at it. And they, had everything. Big house, big car, influential friends, everything they could possibly want. And then they said, this is it. That they're very lucky because they had everything and they saw it was nothing. Bigger house, more cars, well. And so then they said, there must be more to life than this. This is so meaningless. It doesn't bring happiness. All my colleagues are, drinking heavily. None of them are happy. All of them are still on the treadwheel, going, more, for what? Till they fall off like a rodent, exhausted on the wheel, haven't got nowhere. And so then they come to India. India, despite everything, still has a reputation. You want to find some spiritual meaning to your life, go to India. And so they come. They often end up in Dharamshala, take a course at Tushita. What need is there to say more? The childish work for their own benefit. The Buddhas work for the benefit of others. Just look at the difference between them. If I do not actually exchange my happiness for the sufferings of others, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood. And even in cyclic existence, even in samsara, shall have no joy, let alone what is beyond this world. Because of my servants doing no work, and because of my masters giving me no pay, even the needs of this life will not be fulfilled. By rejecting the method that establishes both foreseeable and unforeseeable joy, I cast magnificent delight completely aside. And then, because of inflicting misery on others, in confusion, I seize hold of unbearable pain. If all the injury and fear and pain in this world arise from grasping at a self, what use is that great ghost to me? So the point is that, we imagine that if we take so much good care of ourselves that somehow, if we make that the focal point of our life, that that's somehow going to bring us happiness, but it just doesn't. And so we think if we get more pleasure, that somehow or other, at some point, we will feel satisfied inside. But it's a big black hole. We fill it up with more and more things, more and more sensations, more and more relationships, but it's still a black hole. And so then, at a certain point, if we have any glimpse of wisdom, we think there must be another way. There must be something more to life. Why are we here? Is this all there is? Just getting more and more and more of the same? There must be something more beyond that, a whole different change in orientation. So this is written in the 8th century, but it's not something which is irrelevant nowadays. Compared with how Shantideva was living, we are living like in a God realm. But are we satisfied? Are we happy now? Suicide rates are soaring, and people are feeling more in despair than ever. And we are getting more and more and more and more. And it's not filling up that black hole. So we have to look and see what can actually serve us and serve others. Maybe we need to go in a quite different direction. So that's what he's talking about. How to reorient our whole ideas on what brings real satisfaction and meaning to our lives. Sometimes now we get a lot of students coming from the West, especially from America. They're usually students often gap students, or students who are just on a kind of university, leave to come and stay in India for a while. And of course they are very privileged children, otherwise they wouldn't be able to come to India on these packages with, groups of students and their teachers coming and staying with Tibetans or staying with Indians in various parts. But one question which always comes up is, how do I find meaning in life? Or what is the meaning of life? And I think for young people, 17, 18 years old, to be asking that question is a beautiful thing. That they are actually asking, they ask, how can I make my life meaningful? What do I need to do to be of benefit to others? This is beautiful. These young people, so fresh, so clear, so intelligent, already asking the right questions. And so there is hope in this world, despite, what we've done with it. Of course, there are the young people now who are saying, well, no, let's stop that. Let's find a different way which can really help all beings, including the whole planet, which is suffering so much because of our mismanagement. We're not very good custodians. We've completely raped and polluted our only home, as we all know. sometimes these young people are asking the right questions, and possibly there's enough of them. They will find a better direction than the one we've given them up to now. And it's based on not being me, but recognizing that we have interconnection with all beings on this planet, and that we have a responsibility for all beings on this planet. Not just human beings or animals, but also the trees, the flowers, the plants, life in the oceans and the rivers. I mean, I see it even in my lifetime living in India, what has happened, even in Himachal. Big rivers are now just trickles because of dams. And what do other people to do? This was their river. When I first came in Tashijong, there was a big river. We didn't have running water, we had a river. So you swam in it, you cleaned in it, you washed in it. There were big fish swimming back and forwards. Now it's dry. Where's it gone? And when you see a river, they're filthy. Nobody would want to swim in that. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this to ourselves and to the planet and to all the beings who exist on this planet? So what Shantideva is saying is not something that's just relevant to the 8th century. It's more relevant than ever before. We have to think outside of our own selfish needs and look to the whole planet. What are we doing? How can we take on the suffering of the planet as our own and do something to help? Each one of us has that responsibility. Okay, so I'll do a few, I'm not sure if we're going to finish this afternoon. I think so. We can just zoom through, isn't it? I'll do a few questions instead. Who wrote the commentary you're reading from? Well, that's a nice easy question. Okay, it was written by somebody who's called Kempo somebody, which I don't actually have in his name, but he was a direct, I tell you what, he was a direct student of somebody called Patrul Rinpoche. So Patrul Rinpoche himself heard the commentaries from his teachers on the Bodhicharyavatara innumerable times. I forget how many times, but so many times. And then Kempo, a professor who was a student of him, Powden something I think it is, wrote it down. So although this is a commentary by this Kempo, it is basically the commentary of Patrul Rinpoche, who was a very great Nyingma Lama of the 19th century during the whole non-sectarian movement in eastern Tibet. Patrul Rinpoche was very known for being very eccentric, but he wrote a book called The Words of My Perfect Teacher, which is a beautiful book, and if you haven't read it, you should, which is actually a commentary on the preliminary practices of Chen Yingtik. But in any case, it's a lovely book full of funny stories. So it's easy, it's Dharma made easy. You know. He's pretty heavy, but I mean, he writes funny stories, so that makes you. What other good commentaries regarding Bodhisattva life? There is also a commentary, I think, an early commentary, maybe by Tomi Sambota. Yeah. There is also that. What's it called? Do you know? Anyway, there I don't know. The only commentary we have is this late Nyingma commentary, but you know, all the commentaries are basically, I think, pretty much the same. So I don't know. You could look it up, Google it, commentaries and stuff. Don't ask me. Ask Google. We see more women practicing Dharma. Does this statistically equate one's chances of getting enlightenment higher if they are born as a female in today's day and age? Yes! Yes! I think definitely a female birth is superior at this point in time. There are many things which we don't have to worry about. We have other things. Buddha nature has no gender. Buddha nature is just Buddha nature. In the past, to have a female body was disadvantageous because women were not given the same opportunities for study and practice as the males, and were often under the thrall of their families and their male members. This is not true anymore. Therefore, male or female, we can all study, we can all practice, we can all realize. So whatever gender we are in, we should rejoice. Having said that, no, but truly, I think now there is no problem, spiritually speaking, in having a female birth. Even for, in the monastic order, previously it was not an advantage to be a nun, because we were not given the opportunities for study and practice which came naturally for the monasteries. This is no longer true, at least in the Tibetan tradition, and of course in the Mahayana traditions where they, nuns or monks, they don't make a discrimination and give them the same name. But, so I don't think it matters, but it is very interesting that nowadays the majority of people coming to Dharma talks and involved in Dharma, both in the East and in the West, are females. As females become more educated, they also are drawn more and more to studying and practicing the Dharma. So that His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself said to me, and so I know it's true, he said, sometimes I think the future of the Dharma is in the hands of women. And Karmapa said the same thing when he came to our nunnery. He said, actually, the future of the Dharma is in the hands of the women. Because now, more and more, the women are rising up. Gradually they are becoming, they're, in the West, certainly, there are many of the top teachers are women, and authors, and scholars, and practitioners. Nothing against the men. I mean, the men also, nobody's taking anything from you boys. It's not a cake that the girls get more than the boys get less. I mean, the Dharma is not a cake. And, so the boys don't go down, but the girls come up, and that serves the Dharma. That serves the Dharma, that everybody now can share together. And it's not the priority of one particular group. As with lay people, the Buddha always talked about the fourfold Sangha, the monastic and the lay Sangha, both genders. He always said how important that was, and that he was not even going to leave until the fourfold Sangha was strong. And so normally in most Buddhist countries, the fourfold Sangha is especially centered in the monk Sangha, the nuns being less prominent, and the lay people being there mostly to serve the monks. But nowadays it's becoming much more equalized, especially in the West. The main problem now is that the monastic Sangha has become so small in the West and underappreciated for what they have renounced and the kind of life which they are leading, of renunciation, contentment with little, of purity and celibacy, that is so little appreciated. I mean, if you see a monk or a lama, nobody says, what's wrong with you that you're a monk? What's your problem? What are you avoiding? But they would say that to a Western monk. What's your problem? Why aren't you married? Why aren't you into healthy relationships? And this complete misunderstanding of what the monastic life is all about. This is a big problem in the West now, in the propagation of the Dharma, that there is so little appreciation of the monastic, as in the Catholic Church, because all the scandals now, everybody thinks every priest is kind of a pervert, which is nonsense. Most priests are extremely dedicated and good people who are doing their best. because there's a small percentage who are, you know, the publicity, then it corrupts the whole idea of people's admiration for the priesthood and for nuns, which is very unfortunate. And likewise in Buddhist circles, because there have been some scandals, therefore everybody's tainted by that. But it's not true. The majority are not like that at all. So anyway, yes, so it's very important that women support each other, appreciate each other, and encourage each other, and that they recognize that we are all a part of the Fourfold Sangha. The Buddha didn't make discrimination. Monastic, laity, male or female, all of us should study, practice, and propagate the Dharma. This is what the Buddha saw, as then the Dharma will flourish, he said. When the Fourfold Sangha is well-grounded and strong, and everybody is studying and practicing and helping to teach the Dharma, then the Dharma is very strong. So it's time that the females also took their role seriously. And because the female voice has not been heard, all the books are written by the boys. There's hardly a book which is written by a female. And when occasionally a woman does, like Marjorie, they're so apologetic about being female. Why are they apologizing? But they've been so brainwashed into considering themselves inferior that they feel they have to, please forgive me for daring to say something on my own account, even though I'm just an inferior born female. So now is the time for the female voice to be heard. That doesn't drown out the male voice, but it gives some balance. It's like a choir. You can have a choir full of baritones and tenors and basses, but how about the sopranos and the altos? That makes a full choir. It doesn't drown out the baritones. They harmonize together. But they're not trying to, the sopranos are not trying to sound like baritones. They're trying to sound like sopranos. Do you understand? So we don't need to sound like the boys. We can sound like who we are because we need that balance. Not just in Buddhism, but in the world. We don't need to try to be more boyish than the boys, like Margaret Thatcher or Indira Gandhi. We need to be more feminine, to bring in the feminine side, the nurturing side, the intuitive side, which is needed in the world, because the world has become very out of balance with its heavy macho types, which the world doesn't need right now. End of lecture. Oh, how about using drugs to improve the connection to meditation? It's very dangerous. Because why? I tell you why. Apart from the fact that Buddha said no drugs or intoxicants don't disturb the mind. In Buddhism there are two things, in Tibetan Buddhism especially. One is called Nyam, one is called Tokpa. Nyam is experiences, translated as experiences. The other, Tokpa, means realization. Tokpa means realization of the nature of the mind, our non-dual primordial awareness. That's Tokpa. That's what we're doing. Everything else that happens to us, all the bliss, all the clarity, all the visions, or the shaking, or anything which happens to us apart from direct experience of the nature of the mind is Nyam. And Nyam is not good or bad, but if we get fascinated by it, and we think every time we meditate something has to happen, the mind has to change, exciting visions and experiences, we're trapped. And we will never gain genuine realization. So always, whatever happens in meditation, you go and you tell the Lama and they just say, oh yeah, no. Go back. And drugs will give you lots of nyam, but they won't give you tongva. I consider becoming a nun only because that will give more time to practice. It will be easier to do long-term retreats. Is this motivation enough? Of course. I mean, many people do become monks or nuns because therefore renouncing family, renouncing careers, renouncing all outer distractions and allowing time therefore for study and practice is a very strong motivation for monastic life. And monastics should therefore be respected because they are the professionals, right? They are the ones who have had the time for study and practice. And in itself that is motivation enough, but one should recognize that in this day and age it is very difficult, especially if you are in here, a non-Himalayan, in other words, you're not from the Himalayan places in which there is nice nunneries to go to where you can study and be trained. For ordinary people outside of that system, it's actually quite difficult, the monastic life. One thing, because there is really no support. And nobody financially is going to support you. They will support monastics from the Himalayan regions, but they will not support their own. And so therefore people, when they become, say for example, nuns, if they're Westerners especially, or even Indians, outside of the Himalayan regions, they think, oh, when I become a nun, then all the doors will open, and then they discover all the doors are closed. And there really is no training set up, there is no financial support, there is nowhere to go, and people feel very isolated, lonely. You don't belong to the Tibetans, you don't belong to your own people, you know who you belong to. So as a way of helping with this situation here, the nun from Holland, Tenzin Palmo, started something called Tosamling down below, which is specifically a nunnery intended for non-Himalayan nuns, that they can go there. They nowadays, especially, they can study Tibetan, they can study meditation, they can study the texts. So that is one option. There are not many options if you become a nun outside of the system. We ourselves have started something called the Alliance of Non-Himalayan Nuns, which is trying to help these situations as much as we can, a little financially, but of course nobody wants to give much money to non-Himalayan nuns, not interested. They're more interested in giving to lamas. And now we are just in the process of discussing how to set up a training program for non-Himalayan nuns, so that they can at least, you go to the Lama and you say, oh, Rinpoche, I really want to be a nun. And he said, oh, wonderful, very good karma, yes, 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 get yourself some robes, shave your head, come back tomorrow. And you go back and then you take vows in a language you have no idea what you're saying, but you assume it's good. And then, very good, puts a cut around your neck, bye. That's it. So now you're in robes, shaven head, everybody's calling you Annie. Haven't got a clue. The mind hasn't changed. People imagine when you become a nun, suddenly it all changes. Nothing changes, you're still you. But you look funny. So we are concerned with this, because also a lot of people get ordained who shouldn't be ordained, who have definitely psychological problems and shouldn't be in robes representing Western Sangha. Also very, very sincere, good people who get no support, have have nothing to eat, nowhere to live, nobody cares about them. It's a problem. So right now we are in the process of thinking at least how we can give some basic training for nuns, like maybe just 3 months in the beginning to see if we can train them at least what it is to be a nun, how to be a nun, and set them off, and then try to see from there what we can do to help. Because everyone assumes that nuns are supported by their organization or by their lamas, but they're not. Nobody is responsible. Tibetans consider that every Westerner, including nuns and monks, have a wish-fulfilling tree in their backyard, and therefore they don't need any help, they don't need any support. They're there to raise funds for the Lama. The Lama never thinks, well, do you need anything? Are you okay? One nun I know who had been a nun for 30 years, she went to her Lama and she said, actually, Rinpoche, I have absolutely no money, I'm starving. He said, well, go out and get a job. She was 60. She's been a nun 30 years. So it's a problem. So therefore, yes, being a nun is very beautiful, but when people say, I want to ordain, I say, my first question, how shameful. My first question is, can you afford it? How are you going to manage financially if you have no job? Nobody's going to support you. Even living in India, you need something. So it's a very sad 60 years down the road since the Tibetans came. Nothing has improved. So that has to be thought out too. It's very sad, but it's true. And anybody who has any suggestions, we would welcome them into how to ameliorate this situation a bit. And how to get the message out also that there are all these hundreds of ordained Sangha who have no support whatsoever and are completely overlooked and ignored, despite often their great potential, because many of them were professionals, highly educated, very successful in their lay life, but nothing is done to help them, to train them, so that later they can go out and also be teachers or be an example for others. Mostly they're just trying to keep things going from one to the other, because this is a lifelong commitment. I mean, so many of my friends who were nuns 20 or more years, in the end they gave up. Not because they lost faith in Dharma, but because they could no longer live as nuns. And nobody cared. So I can't say, oh yes, wonderful, be a nun, I rejoice. Because actually it's not easy. People feel lonely, they feel, they don't belong to lay people, but they also don't belong to the Tibetan monastic Sangha, they don't belong anywhere. And it's hard. People don't recognize. They see all these big monasteries coming up, dripping with gold, and they assume that everything's beautiful, but it's not. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what to do about all this. What's this? I don't know. Somebody's email. How should we meditate on these verses? Is it just thinking about the words? In this case, I think it's imagining this, trying to, I don't know, I never did do any of this. But for example, certainly yesterday with the unpleasant aspects of the body, the Buddha definitely, you can read it. I mean, you start with the top of the head to the soles of the feet. Imagine removing all the skin and the flesh and going through different parts of the body in yourself recognizing that, you know, you've got brain and heart and lungs, and then intestines and liver and spleen and kidneys, and just going in your imagination, zooming down, x-raying, and then under all that, all the bones. I mean, you could have a picture up on the wall, you know, one of these anatomical photos of the internal organs, and recognizing that in yourself, this is what I am. It's not in order to get hatred towards the body, but as I said, to lose our enchantment with thinking we're absolutely beautiful. Because, as we said, beauty really is only skin deep. And the moment you remove the skin, then from our point of view as humans, I mean, if you were a lion, you might think the internal organs are delicious. But as human beings, we would be more likely to go, ooh, you know, even to our beloved. And so that's how we meditate on that. We go down over it, and we just see it as it is. Yeah, I mean, a heart actually is not either ugly. I mean, a heart is wonderful, really. And what it does, its operations, is incredible. But you don't want to hug it and cuddle it. You know, I mean, if you saw your beloved without the skin on, you know, you wouldn't immediately rush to embrace them. So that's the point. And also in ourselves, if we think we're ever so lovely, that we should know what's going on inside. That's all. It's just to lose our attachment to thinking that, you know, we're something so special and so beautiful. And once we recognize that our own body doesn't have inside anything that you think is particularly beautiful, then you see that in the bodies of others. And in exchanging ourselves and others and so forth, then it is, you know, you can do Tonglen meditation, and also we can sit and do loving kindness meditation and compassion meditation, starting with ourselves and to those that we are fond of, people that we feel neutral towards, and then towards people that we find difficult, and then to all the world, sending out loving kindness and compassion, and then a joy in whatever happiness there is in the world. So these kind of meditations we can certainly do. I mean, they are very traditional meditations, actually. And in that way we get an experience come in our heart. It's not just stuck up here, but something inside our heart shifts. And it begins to mean something to us, so that when we do see other beings, we respond in a way which is recommended. And it's not just, you know, intellectually reciting to ourselves, but actually, for example, somebody I read the other day, somebody was saying how they were quite irascible kind of people. They got angry very quickly, very irritable. So they decided to do a short course on loving kindness meditation. So they were sitting there thinking, may I be loving, you know, may I be peaceful, and at my ease, and they looked pretty much a waste of time, but anyway, they sat there, you know, for however long, doing these metta meditations, these loving kindness, friendliness meditations. And then later when they left, thinking, well, that was pretty much a waste of time. And then a few days later, somebody, they were going into a parking lot, and somebody took their space that they were aiming for. And he said, automatically, he thought, may you be well and happy. Good luck. And he was so surprised, because he expected to go, you know, and he didn't. Automatically, he just felt happy for that person that they got in that place. I mean, oh, maybe I should get worse. So like that, you know, I mean, we need to practice again and again, and then actually something inside does transform. The Buddha said that we can all change. He said, if we could not change, I would not ask you to change. But since you can change, I say, please change. Right? So, I mean, that's the point. If we do it again and again, we actually repave our neural pathways. I mean, now neuroscience has proved that. That originally people thought that all our neural pathways in the brain, that's it, they're stuck for life, they're genetic. Now it's known that that's not true at all, that it's all very plastic, that we can channel our thoughts and feelings. So if we keep doing it again and again and again, eventually those old negative pathways dry up and new positive pathways are created, because it's all based on habit. If we're used to being annoyed when things go the way we create superhighways. But if we stop using those superhighways and find another path, then at the beginning all the grass grows back again because there's no path there. But if we keep walking, then eventually that makes a path. And if we keep going, it makes a superhighway. Meantime, our superhighway has started grass growing up through it because we're not using that one anymore. So this is why these practices, we have to do them again and again and again and make new pathways. And then it becomes habitual. And the old bad habits fall away. I mean, they are doing a lot of research on this type of thing nowadays. They got a group of people who are just ordinary people off the street, not meditators. And they showed them very unpleasing and violent images, video clips. And, they were tracking what they were thinking. So immediately those parts of the brain which do with anger, fear, aggression, rose bright. And then they took the people away and they started teaching them meditation on loving kindness and compassion. Not for that long, maybe 3 weeks or so. Not long. And not all day, just sessions of doing it. And then they brought them back and they tried them again with other videos of the same kind. And they themselves were amazed, the scientists, that those parts of the brain which had to do with aggression and anger and fear did not light up. And those parts of the brain which had to do with empathy, compassion and love did. And they couldn't believe that in such a short time, the actual brain structure, the neural pathways of these people had been changed. They weren't, hermits and years-long meditators. This was just in a few weeks. They actually changed the actual structure in their brain, and their natural spontaneous response completely changed. So we can do it. That's the point. I mean, we actually can do it, but we have to keep at it. It's practice, right? Like learning an instrument. In the beginning, you can't play the instrument. It sounds ridiculous. But if we practice and practice and practice, in the end we can play. So it's like that. Any of these things, you read it and you go, But if we just read it, that's not enough. We have to become it. Then we recognize, oh yeah, right, I can change. So in Buddhism there are the 3 stages. First we read about or we hear about something, then we go away and think about it, reflect on it, try to understand what it really means. Then the third is, as one Lama said, we become it. In other words, we meditate on it and we repeat it to ourselves and we imagine it, and eventually we become it, yes. But merely hearing and reading in itself is not enough. That's the first stage. And hearing and reading and believing is not the point. The point is to think about it, reflect on it, try to understand what it means. Then, when we're convinced, yes, this is good, then we put it into practice. And once we put it into practice, eventually, it becomes natural. But, it's practice. So practice means practice. We have to do something. Again and again and again and again. People who engage in sadistic, cruel actions have often experienced cruelty and saved themselves as children, and that is called their sadism. Should they be further punished by going to the hell roads? Well, it's not a matter of who is. Nobody's sending you to the hell roads. You are sending yourself. It's a cycle. Many people who have, or some people, who have received sadism and abuse as children use that to cultivate compassion for others who are sadistically abused as children. I've met people whose childhood was unbelievable, but as a result, when they grew up, they thought, well, I really understand what this means, so I can really help others who are in the same situation because I know. So they did not become sadistic abusers in their own turn. They became extremely compassionate therapists. Right? We all have a choice. When we receive something which is very negative, we either can turn it in on ourselves and be full of self-pity or become aggressors in return, or we can use this to embody our empathy with others who are suffering likewise. It's up to us. If we were abused and we turn into abusers, then that means next time we will be abused again, and then we will be abusers, and we're in a cycle. Nobody's punishing us. We are punishing ourselves. Karma isn't judgmental. If we plant poisonous seeds, we will get poisonous plants. That's not because somebody is designing that, because poison seeds have poison plants. Then that poison plant can be used to poison people, or it can be used as a medicine to cure. Many of the herbal medicines are actually poisons if you take too much of them or you don't use them properly. But they also are great healing properties. Depends how you use them. So karma is not a matter of somebody standing outside and judging us. We are moment to moment judging ourselves. So if we create the causes, we're going to get the effects. It's unfortunate. But as I say, people who have been in very horrific situations could either use that to go under or to surmount. It's up to you. Many of the lamas who were in extremely imprisoned after the communist takeover, and they haven't done anything in this lifetime they weren't criminals, but they had some monasteries, etc. So they were in prison. Many of them were tortured or put in labor camps for 20, 30 years. Their whole life taken away from them. But when they came out, rather than being embittered and angry and ready to get their own back, they were filled with loving kindness and compassion and gratitude. So many, I've met some, and they said, well, so grateful because previously compassion was just something you debated about. You know, the 18 different kinds of compassion. But when you're faced with somebody who is interrogating and torturing you, either you give in to fear and anger, or you cultivate compassion. You have a choice. So they decided to cultivate compassion. Stop it being an intellectual topic of debate and feel compassion for the person who wished to harm them. And as a result, they said, we learned so much. All the things which we had intellectually appreciated, finally they had the chance to practice. And so we always have a choice. We think we don't, but we do. have a choice. Will we respond skillfully or unskillfully? And so, even people who as children were abused, and they don't have to grow up abused. They can look and see, as I say, and think, okay, we understand now the mind of someone who causes pain to others. And because I understand, because I've gone through that, I can really be of help for others. And they are. It's up to us. Karma doesn't punish us. We punish ourselves. If all genders are some living beings, then why is there a restriction for girls in some monasteries? Good question. Rather, all should be allowed. Well, I just did comment on that. I mean, the point is, of course, traditionally, not just in Asia, but in the West and everywhere. It was 1972 or something, women were allowed to vote in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Not just Asia. So the solution to this is not only general education for all beings, but also that women should support women. Because often women don't support women. And if women don't support us, who is going to support us? I mean, often we say that when a girl in India gets married, the person she has to fear most is not her husband, but her mother-in-law. Women can be very, very mean to women. And that's why we are always in a very subservient role, because we don't support each other. We don't appreciate each other. We don't respect each other. So, the first step is education. But along with that, it is very important that women appreciate women. And that women appreciate women to the point, as I said before, that our contribution to the world is as females. Not that we try to become more macho than the males. That doesn't help. The world already has more than enough machism. Doesn't need any more. Needs the feminine now. And that is not against the males. The two should go together. Two sides of the same coin. Women are not less human than men. We're all 100% human. Male and female are equal, but they're not the same. Women have their female qualities. Male have male qualities. The two should work together like a hand. You know, you have the back and the front of the hand is the same hand, but it's different. So the two work together. Then we have a good balance in this world. We need the male energy, but we need the female energy too, and equally appreciated. Often I find that the people who are most feminist in an audience and ask the most feminist questions are the men. The women don't ask those questions, but the men feel very indignant on behalf of the women. How sweet of them. Because the women are not supporting themselves very much, and the men feel bad about that. So it's not that one is superior to the other. We are both sides of the same coin. And we should work together to appreciate each other. And not think that as, that either side is more important than the other. Both are needed. Both are very important. We don't want an all-female society. We don't want an all-male society. We want something which comes together both. As the Buddha said, the four-folk society, it was not just men. It was men and women, both. And he recognized that that was a stable society, where you had males and females, both. He said males and females. They're also us to study and practice and propagate, he never just said just men. And women should be quiet and sit in the corner. Never did that. Even in the Pali Canon, he praises nuns for their preaching, for example. This is supreme in preaching. She is supreme in wisdom. This one's supreme in, meditation. This one is supreme in this one is supreme in that. All the nuns and the women, I mean, they were very much praised by Buddha. And he appreciated their contribution. But in time, the male took over and the women were there just to serve. But it was not the way the Buddha set it up. He didn't think like that. So he gave equal opportunity. So from our side, the females have to support each other, not anti-anybody, certainly not anti-male, but nonetheless pro-female. Appreciating our qualities, what can we contribute as women? Along with what the males are contributing. Both together. Then it will be even, unbalanced, which right now is not. So that's the way it goes. So now we are going to have lunch and return at 3 o'clock. And we will then deal with the next part, which is exchanging ourselves for others. The first part is, seeing ourselves as equal. Next part is exchanging ourselves.
Ich muss das da gucken. Mach mal da was drauf, ja. Dankeschön.